The transport takes off from the planet, and the Republic forces are forced to flee from Federation forces into the mountains. In his fighter, Anakin studies the pattern of the drone attack and relates back to Obi-Wan that the drones are following a concerted pattern of attack, and asks the carrier if they are able to scan for a control satellite. Obi-Wan has the ship do a scan and replies that they have identified a disk beyond the Federation freighter, and relates to him the coordinates. Anakin then heads off in that direction and approaches. The Republic force meet Anakin's mother on the mountain and tell her that her son is fighting above in the sky, and she says she knows. The Queen tells her that they have to leave, that the Federation controls the planet, and that she must come with them. But Shmi says the Federation doesn't control the planet, the Gungans do. And they ask her who she is speaking of, and she leads a small number of them down to the swamp edge. Then Shmi calls out in a strange voice over the swamp. The captain says they cannot wait here, and must leave to meet the transport, but the Queen tells them to remain. Then out of the swamp waters arise creatures, unlike any they have ever seen, and Shmi communicates to them in a foreign tongue. They listen to her, as if they understand her, and then descend back into the marsh. Shmi tells the others that they must get to high ground. The Queen tells the captain to go, and they retreat up the mountain. Anakin flies his fighter and is able to see the control satellite. On the Federation ship, one of the officers alerts them to this, but they say to activate its defenses. When he gets close enough, the satellite begins to fire upon him, and he quickly fires a missile at the disk and veers away. Obi-Wan watches as the missile approaches, but lasers shooting from the control craft destroy it. Obi-Wan breathes out and tells Anakin that it's got defenses and to get back to the battle. Anakin is unwilling to give up, saying he is going to try another run. The Queen and the rest of the Republic forces with Shmi climb up the mountain ridge. The battle droids patrol through the forests. Then there is a sound emanating from the forest, and every animal on the forest floor flees for cover up in the trees. Anakin veers around for a second run, and attempts to get in closer, but has to evade the barrage of laser bolts coming in his direction. The Federation men are watching his ship as it approaches. He fires a missile again, and veers away, being pelted by laser fire the entire way. As he moves off, the missile approaches, but is gunned down again by the defensive lasers. Anakin looks back with a sign of frustration. On the surface, Shmi watches into the valley, and the others are there, while it is suggested they have to keep moving. Shmi tells them to wait and watches, when suddenly they notice that something is happening, as water from the streams begins to surge, and the level of the swamps begin to rise. They see it come up higher, and then the water rises, and begins to spread through the valley. The Federation equipment gets stuck in the mud, and the battle droids fall in. And still the water rises over the heads of the battle droids, up over the Federation equipment, and continues up until it is right beneath the canopy of the trees. They look out in wonder over the flooded valley, as now there remains no trace of the Federation presence on Naboo. The Federation freighter receives word from Naboo that the entire valley has flooded, and all their equipment has been lost. They attribute it to the Witch of Naboo, and the Federation men then contact Sidious and explain to him that their entire force on the planet has been destroyed by a great flood. Sidious tells them to go down and wipe out the Republic force on the planet with incendiary bombs. So they give the order and get their fighters ready. The enemy fighters launch, and Obi-Wan informs the pilots that the Federation has dispatched enemy fighters to the planet. Anakin asks R1 to calculate just how close he would have to get to release the missile without them being shot down, and looks at the reply, telling R1 that they are going ahead. Obi-Wan then tells Anakin that Padme is on the planet, but he continues nonetheless, saying he has to get in closer. Obi-Wan says he is going to kill himself, that he will have no time to pull away should he fail, but when Anakin commits himself to going, Obi-Wan transmits only "May the Force be with you." Anakin veers around once again, and the laser bolts begin to barrage him. Even more of the Y-Wings are destroyed, and the commander on the carrier says they must withdraw, but Obi-Wan tells him they cannot retreat now, but tells him to have the men break off engagement and draw back. Obi-Wan then asks about the enemy fighters on the planet, and is told they have just reached the surface. They tell him that they have also detected wide flood on the planet, and that anyone who hadn't taken to the mountains would have been drowned anyway. Obi-Wan decides not to pass this along to Anakin just yet. Then they get word that the drones are moving in to attack the carrier craft. They engage defensive batteries and pull back. On the planet, the Queen and the others notice the enemy fighters searching around. The Queen figures they must be searching for them and has them all take cover. Anakin weaves between the laser bolts to get closer, so that now the control satellite is looming large before his craft, although as he nears the laser fire stops, no longer able to track his progress. R1 is prompting him, but Anakin wants to drive his ship in even closer. Obi-Wan watches his view screen at the two converging points as Anakin's ship moves into the satellite. Then that moment Anakin fires his missile, which rockets forward, and then blasts dead center in the control sensor. The control sensor shatters when it is hit. But Anakin is still careening towards the satellite, unable to stop in time. Obi-Wan watches as the signals are on top of each other. The control satellite suddenly bursts into a million fragments right before Anakin, as his ship flies right through the opening. Obi-Wan calls to Anakin asking if he's alright, then Anakin opens his eyes and composes himself as he answers that he's okay, and Obi-Wan gives out a wild cheer, as do the others in the bridge, as he offers congratulations to him. The force of Y-Wings now are able to more easily contend with the drones and begin to blow them out of space. On the planet, the enemy fighters fly overhead and then loop around. Above, the pilots make out the Republic force on the planet, fully exposed upon the mountain. The Republic forces fire up at them with the last of their weaponry. They think they might be leaving them, but the commander says they are looping around for a bombing run, and Padme tells them that they must scatter. The ships move towards them on the mountain as they attempt to disperse. They move in closer, and there is nowhere for them to flee as the ships screech down upon them and dive in on them. One of the ships is suddenly blown to pieces, then another, as a Y-Wing screams over the mountain. Padme looks up and shields her eyes from the glare of the sun, seeing the ship streak past through the sky. Anakin fires on a couple more enemy ships as they scatter. The Federation realize that their drones are now almost completely gone, and the remaining Y-Wings are starting their attack run, but they cannot fight them as their craft is not a warship. They send to recall their fighters, who then disengage and flee back to the Federation ship. Anakin pursues them and sees as the Federation cruiser turns and then escapes into hyperspace. It is now sunset on Naboo, as the carrier with the Y-Wings and Obi-Wan lands on a surface platform atop the Citadel. Anakin flies overhead and lands his fighter on the landing platform, and when he climbs out is greeted by cheers. Obi-Wan watches as Anakin makes his way out and the two meet and embrace. Padme arrives too, and runs out to Anakin and throws her arms around him. He hugs her and lifts her off her feet, carrying her between rows of clapping pilots. Walking to the edge of the Citadel and looking down into the Central Park, seeing it filled with the jubilant, thronging people of Naboo, cheering enthusiastically for their greatest hero,